Okay, thank you. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 2013 Bus Industry Annual Dinner and launch of Moving Australia 2030, a report from the Moving People 2030 Task Force. You can see who the members of the Moving People 2030 Task Force are on the screens and on the signage we have here tonight. The Task Force over the last 12 months has worked hard to deliver this report since Minister Albanese announced the formation of the Task Force at this dinner 12 months ago. Tonight's launch of the report is even more important because we have a federal election in September. The Task Force of 8 like-minded national organisations have combined forces to articulate a transport plan for an active and productive Australia to 2030. Tonight's proceedings will involve a number of presentations, but most importantly we will hear from Minister Albanese, Warren Truss, Shadow Minister for Transport, and Lee Rhiannon, the Green spokesperson for Transport. The visit last week of the Prime Minister and opposition leader to Rooty Hill in the western suburbs of Sydney highlights the importance of transport and particularly how we move people, and will be important, we believe, to the result of the federal election. Transport issues that relate to all outer metropolitan areas of our capital cities and major cities such as Newcastle and Wollongong and Geelong will be critical, we believe, in the voting choices of Australians in these communities at the federal election. This is highlighted when we look at what are known as vampire maps. These were prepared by researchers Jago Dodson and Neil Sipe from Griffith University in Queensland a number of years ago. These maps are based on 2006 census data collected about residents of each capital city in Australia and their expenditure on transport. What these maps highlight in the context of an election is where voters live who are most vulnerable to fluctuation in oil prices. These fluctuations have an impact on their ability to meet their mortgage repayments. The researchers called people in these communities as mortgage and oil vulnerable. The areas in darkest red on the maps of Sydney that you can see are the outer metropolitan suburbs, and the same applies in every capital city to a similar extent. But the bigger cities of Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane is where the real hurt is felt, in outer metro suburbs. The interesting thing about these mortgage and oil vulnerable areas is that when you superimpose federal electorates over these maps, a lot of these areas are within marginal seats that will make the difference in who will be in government after September 14. As you can see, there is a direct correlation between areas vulnerable to oil price fluctuations and areas where people live and where marginal electorates are. The outer metropolitan electorates, according to the analysis of my internal guru Isaru Nilagama at our office, says that at the next federal election, it will be clear that transport is a critical issue in these electorates and how people vote. In fact, 33 electorates are held by 6% or less at the next federal election, and these fall into these outer metropolitan areas of high vulnerability to oil price fluctuations. What these maps don't tell you that these areas also tend to have the worst level of access to public transport services, and in some cases no services at all. The National Growth Areas Alliance estimates $50 billion of investment is required to halve the gap between outer metro and inner metro areas of Australian cities in terms of access to jobs, services and public transport. Families in these areas are commonly forced into owning 2 or 3 cars per household as the only choice they have. A study from Melbourne by Professor Graham Curry found that more than 20,000 households in outer metropolitan Melbourne run more than two cars on an income of less than $500 a week. The provision of more public transport services and improved active transport infrastructure is part of the solution to addressing living costs in these communities. A key part of the solution is land use driving good transport outcomes. This is the emerging school of thought in transport planning. While efficiencies within network planning and engineering solutions for transport systems are vitally important, the higher level approach, the bigger picture solution, is a better integration of land use management with transport to make walking, cycling and using public transport a no-brainer, second nature to residents of our capital and major cities, and second nature particularly to people in outer metropolitan areas. According to the Victorian Council of Social Services, for new development, 30 lots per hectare can support mixed uses and public transport provision. For infill, brownfield and greenfield sites, a transit-oriented development philosophy and focus must underpin the design. Fixing the transport issues where we've already built and ensuring access to public and active transport for new residential areas is the key to building a public and active transport culture. When we blow up the previous slide to look at the three most marginal seats in Sydney, we find in the seat of Lindsay, held by Assistant Treasurer David Bradbury by 1.1%, the suburbs of Penrith, South Penrith, Cambridge Park, Claremont Meadows and Werrington fall into the band of red. These areas alone can make the difference between winning and losing the seat in September. We see the same in the electorate of Macquarie, won by Louise Marcus for the Coalition at the last election, where the population centre of Katoomba falls into the dark red areas. In Greenway, which the government won and hold by less than 1%, almost the whole electorate, and particularly the Seven Hills area, are facing oil price pressures. In the context of the 2010 election, these three seats were decided by a few thousand votes. So the BIC's point, the BIC's point in all of this is that the recommendations of the task force report are important and provide a suite of ideas, policies and programs that we think and we hope the ALP, Coalition and the Greens need to seriously consider and adopt. Certainly, the current government and Minister Albanese in particular have done more in the context of cities, urban development and how we move people than any previous Commonwealth government. But more needs to be done, not only by the ALP, but the Coalition and Greens, to buy in and in poker terms, call them and raise them. These issues, BICs believe, will make the difference between winning and losing the next federal election. The report is about ideas and solutions that might assist. There is no silver bullet solution, but if we can agree between federal, state and local governments that a suite of solutions can address these challenges, then this report has done its job. I'll be back after your entree to introduce Wayne Patch and to hear from Minister Albanese. Thank you. Enjoy your entree.